I arrived earlier than usual that morning. April in Austin had that soft kind of sunlight, warm enough to wake the day, not harsh enough to burn the door handle. Same parking spot under the old oak. Same cup of hot coffee from the corner shop. Same worn leather bag that had followed me through 6 years at Solar Wave. Only one thing was different. I was carrying a folder. Inside was everything I'd built for that company: lines of code, solar efficiency models, the predictive systems I'd trained back when SolarWave didn't even have a proper office. I didn't bring it to brag. I just wanted to prove something simple: that I deserved a 10% raise. $50 a week. Not much, but enough to cover a few extra respiratory therapy sessions for Ethan. The morning briefing ended early. Max, founder and CEO, was being congratulated by his partners. The company had just signed a major AI contract with the state of Texas. The media was calling it revolutionary, a predictive solar grid optimizer. I looked at the lines of code projected on the screen and realized they were mine, the same version I had refined last summer. When everyone left, I knocked on Max's door. He didn't look up right away. Eyes fixed on his monitor, he flipped through papers like it was another routine meeting on his schedule. I spoke clearly, laid out my years of service and my specific contributions. Only then did he lift his gaze, rest his elbows on the desk, and smile. "You're asking for a raise?" he said, as if I'd told him a joke. 10%? That's about $50 a week? I nodded. "Yes, I believe I've earned it." He laughed. Not loud, but enough. That kind of half-smile laugh anyone who'd ever worked under Max Harlow would recognize. The one that made you wonder if he was amused, or just being condescending. Probably both. "You're not worth that much, Lena," he said gently, as if it were a fact of nature. "Here, we pay for the system, not the person running it." I stayed silent. I had prepared for rejection, but not like this. Not words that made me feel like a replaceable tool. "You do good work," Max went on, crossing his arms. "But we have a whole team. The system is everyone's effort. You understand that, right?" I nodded automatically, gathered my folder, and walked out. The hallway lights blurred a little as I stepped into the open space. I passed the workstations, the sound of printers, keyboards, and a laugh from the coffee bar. Everything went on as usual, and that's when it hit me. Loyalty doesn't have a cell in the spreadsheet of profit. That evening, I drove back to the small second-floor apartment near the tracks. 3 rooms, cluttered but warm. Home, in the fragile sense of the word. Mom sat at the kitchen table, sorting Ethan's prescriptions. She looked up. "Did you talk to Max?" "I did," I said, pulling milk from the fridge. "Didn't go well. Worse than you know." "Think." She didn't press, just murmured. "Have you eaten yet? I can warm the soup." Ethan was asleep. 6 years old. Asthma, chronic breathing issues, the kind that demanded more patience than medicine. He lay on his side, blanket pulled up to his chest, the small oxygen machine humming steadily beside him. On the table was a fresh medical bill, red-lined, due at the end of the month. I sat beside him, watching that small face for a long time. His tiny fingers were taped to hold the sensor in place. I whispered, mostly to myself, "I won't let anyone belittle me, and I won't let anyone steal what I built. Because if I stay quiet, you'll grow up thinking people can take your work without asking. And that's not the world I want you to believe in." I left his room and sat down at the desk by the window. The laptop screen glowed in the dark. I opened an old folder, Model V1, Thin Cloud Error Optimization. File after file, time-stamped at impossible hours, 1:57 a.m., 3:02 a.m., the nights after Ethan fell asleep. Each note carried a memory. Test failed. Efficiency up 3.7%. Need finer parameter tuning. I remembered every line, like remembering the milestones of raising a child, like remembering the first time I called 911 because Ethan couldn't breathe. My life had always been a quiet war, never loud, never easy. I opened a new document and typed a few lines. Record full development history, backup personal data, review intellectual property clauses, and, if necessary, walk away. I saved the file. Didn't call it Plan for Revenge. Didn't call it Exit Strategy. Just one simple name: taking back my name. Not every storm begins with thunder. Some arrive quietly, like the chill that slips into your palms, like the look in someone's eyes when they deny the work you once believed would be honored. After that talk with Max, I didn't quit. I still showed up on time, logged into the system, and checked the data as if nothing had happened. But something inside me had shifted. I no longer believed that time would prove my worth. I no longer waited for anyone to see my effort. I started watching, noting, comparing. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, while scrolling through the company's internal news feed, I saw something that made my heart skip. The headline blinked on screen: SolarWave files expedited patent for AI invention. Solar performance forecasting system developed by M. Harlow. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't mistaken. Max, his name was on it. I sat there for a long while, staring at the screen, my mind blank. Not angry, not yet, just hollow, like stepping off a stair you thought was still there. I opened the internal archive, logging in with my long-held project management credentials. I traced through every file, every version, scrolling to the bottom of each technical document, where the system automatically recorded the author's name. And there it was. My name was gone, replaced by M. Harlow. Even the files I remembered creating, the ones from that night in 2020, when Ethan had a fever and I coded through the dark, had been reassigned. It felt like someone had walked into my home, taken down the family photos, and replaced them with a stranger's confident smile. I didn't cry. I opened another tab and started copying. Every file, every version. I saved them to an external drive. Then I pulled up the revision history, a timeline of edits, showing who had changed what, who had rewritten, who had overwritten. Max's name appeared more times than I expected. One modification caught my eye: 2:14 a.m., 6 months ago. That was when I had taken 3 days off because Ethan was in the hospital. I printed every timestamp. Not to sue, not yet. Just to keep a record, to hold on to what was left of me before it vanished. The days moved more slowly after that. I worked like someone walking on thin ice. No one knew what I was doing. I still made coffee, still smiled when people asked how Ethan was doing. But in my head, I was already rewriting my story. That evening, I came home later than usual. The apartment was quiet. Warm light spilled from the kitchen, where Mom was peeling fruit, her shadow soft against the wall like a scene from an old film. Ethan sat on the floor with his magnetic drawing board, sketching odd little shapes only a child could imagine. "Mom," he looked up, eyes bright and curious. "Did you make the solar energy?" I froze. The question hit me harder than I expected. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to deny it either. I sat beside him, brushing my hand through his hair. "Yeah, helped make it." "So the houses can have light?" "Yes, so the lights can stay on, sweetheart." Ethan nodded, satisfied, as if he'd just learned something important about the world. I looked at him, at the glow on his cheeks, then at the unopened hospital bill still lying on the table. And in that moment, I knew. Everything I was doing wasn't just about fairness. It was about truth. So that one day, when my son grows up, he'll know his mother didn't stay silent when someone stole what she'd earned. And that's when someone tries to dim your light, there's one way to fight back: by lighting something brighter, stronger, untouchable. I pulled him close, listening to the soft hum of the oxygen machine behind us. A storm was coming, but this time I was ready. I left home early the next morning, when Austin was still damp with mist and the streets were quiet. There was a hum inside me, soft, invisible, but gathering strength. Ethan's grandmother sat at the kitchen table, peeling fruit like every other day. I didn't tell her exactly where I was going, just said I might be home late. She looked at me for a long time, as if she already knew something important was coming. At noon, I met with Rachel Kim. She was an in-house legal specialist at SolarWave. Quiet, reserved, but I knew she was decent. We weren't close, but we'd spoken during late shifts before, and I'd always sensed a quiet respect from her. We chose a small cafe on Riverside, the kind with old wooden tables and sunlight streaming through big windows. As soon as I sat down, Rachel leaned in and lowered her voice like she was afraid someone might overhear. She said there was something I needed to know, then pulled out a folded sheet of paper from her bag. Max was preparing to file an intellectual property claim for the company's AI energy system, and in that filing, he listed himself as the sole inventor. There was no mention of me anywhere. My body went cold, my throat tightened as if someone had squeezed it shut. I had suspected this might happen, but part of me still hoped I was wrong. Now, the truth was right in front of me. Max was trying to steal my work and call it his own. Rachel looked worried. She said she couldn't keep a copy or act openly, but she could help me access the company's old data repository, the backup system that stored the earliest versions before they were edited. We drove to SolarWave's offsite data center in the tech district on the south side of the city. The air inside was cool, filled with the low hum of servers, steady, mechanical, almost like a heartbeat. The green indicator lights blinked quietly, like eyes that never slept. Rachel led me to an old admin workstation. With her limited access credentials, we could still reach the backup region. I typed in my password and followed the familiar directory path. Folder after folder appeared, the drafts of the solar performance prediction model I had built 3 years earlier. I opened one file dated August 16th, 2019, Ethan's birthday. I remembered that night. He had a fever, and I stayed up watching over him. When he finally fell asleep, I returned to my desk and wrote the very first lines of code for that system. The note was still there. Created 0207 AM, 08/16, 2019, L. Carter. I opened more files, later versions, each one stamped with my name and handwritten notes like efficiency improved 3.7% and adjust temperature filter module. Details no one else could have faked. Only the person who wrote them would remember those exact trials. Tears pressed behind my eyes, but I held them back. Not from pain, this was clarity. Everything I needed to prove that I had built what they were now profiting from was right here. I plugged in a USB drive, the one I always carried, engraved with my son's name, Ethan. I copied every folder, every log, every timestamp. When the transfer finished, I just sat there, staring at the monitor. Something inside me shifted. I was no longer the single mother trying to earn acknowledgement. I was the woman standing up to protect her name and her child's future. Rachel placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. She asked if I wanted an outside attorney to store a copy, just in case the company found out and tried to erase the files. I nodded. On the drive home, I didn't play music, didn't make calls. I just thought about Ethan, about how he'd asked me the other night if I made the sun's energy, and how I'd smiled when I said yes. Now I understand. If I stayed silent, Ethan would grow up thinking it's normal to accept having your work taken from you, and I couldn't let him believe that. When I got home, he was already asleep. My mother was reading in the living room, the light soft and gold. I leaned down, kissed Ethan's forehead, and sat beside him for a long while. Inside me, something was transforming. From anger to resolve, from hurt to purpose. Tomorrow, I will no longer be the same person. I don't know how Novagrid found me. The message appeared that afternoon, just as I got home and set my bag down. In my inbox was a short subject line. We need to talk. Nova Grid Energy. I opened it, my hands trembling slightly. The email was polite, concise, and straight to the point. They had been following my work at SolarWave, even though my name wasn't officially credited, and had reason to believe that I was the real creator of the AI system, reshaping the clean energy industry. We care about what you've actually built, not what others claim. If you're open to it, we'd like to have a conversation. No commitments, just between professionals. I read it over and over, wary yet unable to ignore the quiet feeling of being seen. A feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. I replied, I'm open to a conversation, but I'd prefer to stay anonymous at first. The interview took place 2 days later over Zoom. I used an alias, kept my camera blurred, and spoke only about the technical aspects of my work, never mentioning SolarWave or Max. But the people on the other side, a technical director and an HR executive, already knew. They didn't dance around it. After I walked them through several optimization principles within the AI system, the director said, "We know you developed the core architecture for SolarWave's predictive energy distribution model. No one else could trace the logic this precisely unless they built it themselves." I paused. I didn't deny it. "We'd like to bring you to Novagrid," they continued. "Head of Energy Intelligence. Triple your current salary. You'll own every future patent under your name, not the company's. And since we know you have a young son, your healthcare package will include full coverage for any child under 12, no limits." I didn't answer immediately. They didn't push. I just said I'd need time to think. When the call ended, I shut my laptop and sat still, listening to the slow, steady tick of the wall clock. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I walked around the block instead, the cool air clearing my thoughts. Two voices argued quietly in my head. If I said yes, I'd be branded a traitor. Max would call me disloyal, leaving when the company needed me most. Some would say I'd sold my soul to the competition. But if I stayed, I knew one thing for certain. My name would vanish from everything I'd ever built. I thought of all those years. The late arrivals were due to Ethan being hospitalized. The nights are spent coding by battery light during power outages. The reports Max never read, but always signed. Rachel's quiet smile when she handed me the USB. Ethan's innocent question, "Mom, did you make the sun's energy?" I didn't need fame. I didn't need applause. I needed recognition. Not for me, but so that someday, if someone asked my son, "What did your mom do?" he could answer without hesitation. That night, I walked into his room. He was sleeping soundly, his cheeks flushed from the latest round of treatment. Beside his pillow was his worn stuffed animal, and the thin blanket my mother had tucked around him. I sat beside him for a long time, holding his small hand. Then I stood, walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up Novagrid's email. No long words, no speeches. I typed, "I accept your offer. Please let me know the next steps." My fingers shook as I hit send, but inside I felt a deep calm. It was like laying the first brick of a house no one could erase my name from. Through the window, the city lights shimmered in silence. I whispered to myself, "Ethan, I chose justice. For both of us." I left SolarWave on a Monday morning, offering a few polite words before stepping through the glass doors for the last time. Max stood there, shaking my hand with that professional smile. "Wish you success," he said. I nodded, keeping my face steady. But behind me, everything inside had already changed. A few days later, the storm began. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my phone vibrating. An internal announcement from SolarWave's communications department was circulating. Lena Carter terminated for ethical violations and breach of data ownership policy. The headline read like a tabloid splash. Below it, a short paragraph declared the company's right to reclaim all code and data assets. I read it again and again, steadying my breath in the dark. Ethical violations? I had never publicly claimed authorship. I had simply done my work. And now, overnight, I was being cast as a thief. Soon after, a letter arrived from SolarWave's legal counsel, a sharp, formal demand. Return all data belonging to SolarWave, including any modules, copies, or backups in your possession. They threatened to sue for intellectual property theft, breach of confidentiality, and collusion with a competitor. I sat in my small apartment, the email glowing on the screen, my hands trembling slightly. Behind me, my son was asleep, his breathing machine humming softly. The walls were lined with unpaid medical bills. If the lawsuit came before Novagrid spoke publicly, before anyone knew the truth, I could lose everything. My job, my credibility, my voice. It didn't take long for the blogs to pick it up. Single mother fired for stealing source code? Engineer accused of leaking AI data to Novagrid? They posted pictures, paparazzi shots of me carrying Ethan into the clinic. My face was pale and tired, with dark circles under my eyes, and Ethan was in his stroller with an oxygen mask. The photos spread like wildfire. Commenters asked why a company with evidence needed hospital pictures. Others accused me of using my son's illness for sympathy. I stopped going out. Every time I did, someone tried to film me. One night, while tucking Ethan in, he looked up with those soft, worried eyes. Mom, are you going to jail? The question hit me like a blow. He was only 6, and already worried about protecting me. I brushed his hair gently. No, honey, I'm just fighting to prove the truth. I spoke firmly, so he could hear strength in my voice. He nodded and turned over, drifting into sleep. The days that followed felt like living under a storm cloud. Each morning, I woke before 5, checking my inbox, the news feeds, the forums, tracking who said what, who posted what. I avoided public spaces. Novagrid remained silent to protect its reputation. Rachel helped me monitor the damage. She gathered posts, screenshots, slanderous claims, evidence of the smear campaign. She told me to prepare to release the backup. Data as proof when the time was right. I agreed. But timing would be everything. Max didn't stop there. He emailed major investors, attaching doctored screenshots, suggesting I was transferring SolarWave's code to Novagrid. He wanted to poison the air around me. A contact in finance leaked that investors were now questioning whether I'd abandoned the company in crisis. Every night, I worked like a ghost soldier. I used every technical skill I had to trace data access, to see who was probing the USB Rachel was safeguarding, who was trying to unlock the encryption keys. I checked every file's digital signature, every hash string, tracking for tampering, line by line. One night, exhaustion hit me mid-check. I fell asleep at the desk, bathed in the blue light of my screen, numbers flickering like a code of survival. When I woke, I reactivated the intrusion alert, knowing full well that if SolarWave's servers detected the ping, it could draw attention. But I needed to know if someone was reaching for my files. Sometime past midnight, I heard knocking. My chest tightened. I looked through the peephole. No one there. Just the hallway door shifting in the wind. Maybe a reporter. Maybe someone is digging through the trash. For the first time, I realized I wasn't safe anymore. But I didn't retreat. I remembered what I told Ethan. Mom chooses justice. I remembered Rachel's steady eyes when she handed me the USB. Be careful, Lena. They're powerful. But you have the truth. I looked at my reflection in the window. Tired eyes, messy hair, fingertips rough from endless typing. I whispered to myself, the darkest night is when you guard the flame. Don't let their laughter or their lies silence you. At dawn, I opened my laptop again, checked my inbox. Novagrid still listed my position as pending. I messaged Rachel, get ready, we'll need to activate the backup copy. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by rumors, lawsuits, and sleepless nights, I realized something had shifted forever. I was no longer the woman they tried to shame. I was the one fighting back, not just for myself, but for the truth and for my son. I woke in the middle of the night. Time felt both still and moving, like an old clock dragging its hands from one minute to the next. I looked at my son sleeping, the steady hum of the breathing machine filling the quiet room. My mother had long since gone to bed. I opened my laptop and reread the SolarWave email for the 10th time that night, scanning every line. Nothing new. The next morning, I called Rachel. She answered right away, her voice trembling a little, maybe out of the same fear that sat in me. She said she had new information. Among the internal records she'd kept, there was an ownership addendum Max had inserted after the original registration. She'd reviewed the older file and confirmed the timestamp. The addendum came after I submitted the final beta version to the company. Rachel had already quit after things between her and Max turned volatile. She told me she couldn't stand watching other people's work being stolen. Even after leaving, she still had an old admin key to SolarWave's internal backup, something Max never thought to revoke. We agreed to meet that evening in an empty parking lot outside the city. The sky was fading to gold. Rachel parked behind me, brake lights glowing, then stepped out quickly with a small USB drive in her hand. I brought my external hard drive, the one holding my backup. We didn't bother with pleasantries. Rachel opened her backseat door, placed the USB on the passenger seat, and said softly, "These are the supplemental documents, the altered contract appendix, internal emails, showing Max sent a forged file to legal. Timestamp 3:12 a.m., the 22nd of last month, while he was on vacation with his family. I took the USB, my fingers shaking. We exchanged only a few words. Stay safe. Don't let anyone see you. Only share this with a lawyer you trust. Then she got back in her car and drove away. I stayed for a while, watching the city lights blur through the windshield. A few blocks away, I parked again and opened the USB. Inside was a folder named Appendix/Modified. 2 PDFs, before and after. I ran a file comparison, line by line, timestamp by timestamp. There it was, the altered signature, the fake merge seal, the metadata mismatch. The hash code confirmed what I already knew. The original line that once read Tene 10/12/2023 L. Carter had been replaced with Harlow, under a new timestamp. I exhaled. There was no denying this. A few hours later, an email arrived from Max himself. He must have known I'd found something. "Good luck, Lena," he wrote. Then added, "If you return to SolarWave, I'll make sure you receive shares in the company. Full health coverage for your son. I've thought about it. You and I don't have to be enemies." I stared at the message on the white screen, a peace offering or a trap. I typed 3 words. Keep your pity. I choose the truth. Then I closed the laptop and went for a walk through the quiet streets. I thought about everyone who had been burned by decisions made in rooms they weren't invited into. I thought about the young developers, the ones who looked up to people like me, hoping that maybe one woman standing her ground could make a difference. That night, I decided I would speak publicly, not to destroy Max, but to tell my story, honestly, clearly. I reached out to a respected tech journalist who specialized in clean energy startups. I sent her everything: the altered appendix, the internal emails, the original backup files, along with a simple statement: I will take full responsibility if any of this is proven false. When the interview went live, the photo was plain: me in thin glasses, tired but with steady eyes. I spoke about what it means to be erased from your own creation, and the moment I decided silence was no longer an option. I just want credit for what I built, I said, not out of revenge, but because the truth deserves light. The tech community began to rally. The article's tone shifted. People compared me to other engineers who had been written out of their own work. They wrote about how rare it was, a single mother still fighting to keep her name alive in the tech world. In the comments, someone called me the brave mother with her own source code. Another wrote, "She finally spoke up." Developers started sharing their own forgotten projects, saying they'd once feared being erased too. Max fell silent. I knew the story had hit him harder than he expected. He thought this would stay an internal battle. He didn't understand what happens when the truth gets oxygen. That evening, at Ethan's routine hospital visit, I sat by his bed in the dim hallway light. He was sleeping, the hum of the machine steady beside him. I opened my phone. The headline read, "The engineer they tried to erase fights back." I typed a message to Rachel. "We're ready. It's time to move forward." When I got home, I held my son close, watching the glow of the monitor flicker against the wall. The bills were still there, the fatigue still deep, but something in me had hardened, clear as stone. This was never about $50. It was about the right to speak the truth, even when they tried to silence it. I wasn't afraid anymore. That night, I drafted a letter to NovaGrid, attaching the forged appendix, the verified backups, and my full cooperation for transparency. I deleted Max's offer to come back from my mind. I didn't need his apology. All I needed was the light of the truth to burn through the darkness he built. The trial was set for a Tuesday in spring at the Travis County Courthouse in Austin. The courtroom was wide and solemn, rows of polished wooden benches glinting under the chandeliers. Cameras waited behind tall windows, their flashes sweeping across tense faces. Reporters lined the halls, microphones ready. Inside, the air was still, charged with the weight of what was about to unfold. I walked in with Rachel beside me, the USB drive clutched in my hand. My dress was simple, my hair tied back. My face is calm, but not afraid. Across the room stood Max, in a black suit, his expression cold. He looked at me like a man daring the storm to strike. The hearing opened with Solar Wave's argument. Their attorney accused me of breaching confidentiality, stealing proprietary data, and falsifying algorithm files. They demanded that I return all material, pay damages, and issue a public apology. Then my lawyer rose. She began with a quiet, steady voice and displayed the evidence, side-by-side slides of the original contracts against the forged appendices Max had submitted. Then Rachel took the stand. Her voice was firm, her eyes unwavering as she described, step by step, how Max had emailed her late one night, instructing her to alter the authorship on the contract, to falsify timestamps, to cover his tracks. She presented the internal emails, every file, every metadata tag, every audit log, proof that Max knew exactly what he was doing. Max's composure cracked. He shot up, fists clenched, his voice echoing through the courtroom. No one believes a sick single mother could have written that algorithm. Who would think you did this? You want people to pity you, Lena? The room went silent. No coughs, no whispers. Even the cameras stopped moving. I looked at him, just for a moment. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. Maybe you're right, I said. I don't have power. I don't have money, but I have proof. I have the code in my backups, the emails, the commit logs, and a promise to my son that I won't stay silent. That's my reason not to give up. Something shifted in that room. Faces that had once watched with doubt now softened, some with empathy, some with respect. My lawyer continued, presenting the verified data logs, the original source files with my comments marked L. Carter, the timestamp records, and forensic validation that could not be faked. The judges withdrew to deliberate. I sat still, the USB pressed tightly in my hand, as if holding on to my own name. Outside, the camera lights flickered like restless fireflies. After 3 long hours, the gavel struck. The judge's voice rang out, cutting through the air like a bell. This court recognizes Mrs. Lena Carter as the rightful creator and sole owner of the AI system, associated data, and intellectual property. Solar Wave Technologies is hereby ordered to compensate damages and issue a public apology through national media and company communications. Applause rippled through the courtroom, quiet at first, then rising. Supporters stood, clapping. Max sat frozen, face pale, eyes darting around as if realizing, for the first time, that he was alone. By the next morning, Solar Wave's stock collapsed, down 65% in a single session. Investors panicked. The board convened an emergency meeting. Headlines called it the fall of a company built on lies. By evening, Max was forced to resign. Cameras caught him leaving the building, shoulders slumped, the once confident CEO, now just another headline. I left the courthouse quietly. I thanked Rachel, my lawyer, and the small team that had stood by me. No victory poses, no cheers, just a calm walk toward the door, with a heart louder than any applause. That night, my mother was waiting by the door, her eyes shining. Ethan was asleep, his breathing even and light. I hugged her, and we both cried softly, not from sadness, but from release. Later, I sat by my son's bed and whispered, "We did it, sweetheart. It's going to be better now." I kissed his forehead and held him close, the glow from the window washing over us both. When I stepped out onto the balcony, Austin's lights blinked across the night. I thought back to what Max had said the day I asked for a raise. "You're not worth $50. Now the world had seen otherwise. My worth was never his to decide. It was written, in justice, in truth, and in the name I refused to let them erase. My first day at Nova Grid began with sunlight spilling through the glass doors, catching on the polished floors of the long hallway. I walked in as the new director of predictive systems, a title I once thought I'd never hold. I passed rows of open desks where young engineers gathered around white tables, laptops glowing, their voices weaving through lines of code and neural networks. Some of them looked up, curious, respectful, whispering my name. They called me Boss Carter, a nickname soft but filled with recognition. I took my seat at the leadership desk, adjusted the mic for the project kickoff meeting, and glanced at the screens ahead. Optimized code, Texas weather data, power grids humming in balance, and the first predictive model surpassing every benchmark. A young engineer looked at me, eyes bright with admiration. I smiled faintly. This wasn't a personal victory. It was a milestone of everything that had come before. In those first few weeks, I spent time beside every new hire, listening to their ideas, hearing their dreams, and sharing what I'd learned. The mistakes we make when energy shifts from wind to sun to shadow. I told them my story, how I had once been erased, and how I chose to stand up. I wanted them to understand. No one has the right to take your name off the work you create. Outside of work, I was rebuilding my life too. Ethan was recovering. His lungs were stronger with the new treatment. One morning, when I arrived at the office, a colleague handed me a small photo frame. Inside was a picture of Ethan at school while holding a drawing of a bright yellow sun. Beneath it, in messy handwriting, "Mom is my light." I froze. For a moment, the whole office went still. I took the frame in my hands, eyes stinging, and said quietly, "That's my light too." Warm applause filled the room. Weeks later, NovaGrid launched our AI system as part of a national clean energy initiative across several Midwest states. During the federal bidding presentation, our team showcased the system's predictive model, an error margin of just 4%, and projected cost savings of 23%. We won. The deal was worth hundreds of millions. NovaGrid became a household name in energy innovation. On the office TV, the news headline scrolled, "NovaGrid wins federal contract using AI platform, developed by former erased engineer of SolarWave." I stared at it, my name standing beside NovaGrid, no longer hidden, no longer borrowed. Meanwhile, across town, in a dim apartment, lit by a flickering lamp, Max sat among piles of papers, his laptop screen glowing with that same headline. My name was right there. His face was hollow, his walls cracked, like the echo of his own undoing. I thought of him, not with anger, not with pity, just understanding. My mother used to say, "True worth never disappears if you protect your own name." She was right. That evening, I gathered the team on NovaGrid's rooftop. The Austin skyline stretched before us, glass towers, winding streets, sunlight glinting off the solar panels outside our building. I told them, I didn't come here to redo what SolarWave failed to do. I came to build something fairer, with all of you, a place where every contribution is seen, where every name stays. They cheered, their applause rising into the fading light. I looked at them, my team, my second chance, and at Ethan's drawing propped on my desk inside, glowing in the golden sunset. A single warm tear slipped down my cheek. That night, I came home to find Ethan asleep, my mother reading under the soft lamplight. I knelt beside my son, breathed in the faint scent of his medicine, and whispered, "We made it, sweetheart. You're the reason I never gave up." I stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched wide and quiet, the night breeze brushing against my skin. From the rooftop of NovaGrid, golden light shimmered upward like constellations reborn. I smiled, feeling peace settle in my chest. After every sleepless night, after every laugh of doubt, I was still here, with my name, my work, and my light. And that was my new dawn. A year later, I stood on the stage of the National Energy Conference, the same event I once watched through a live stream, wishing I could be there. The hall shimmered under a canopy of lights. Delegates from across the states, energy companies, researchers, government officials, filled every seat. Behind me, the NovaGrid logo glowed across the massive backdrop. My presentation on predictive AI for energy management had just ended. Then they announced it. I was the recipient of Innovation of the Year, the highest award in clean tech innovation. I looked down at the front row. Ethan sat there, his eyes shining, his smile brighter than any light in the room. When my name was called, he clapped harder than anyone else, the sound of a son applauding his mother. My heart stopped for a beat, then surged with a pride I could barely contain. In that moment, I remembered the sleepless nights, the darkness of doubt, the silence, the 2 a.m. glow of a USB drive in my hand. I remembered Ethan's voice asking if I was the one who made the sun's energy, and how he waited for the truth. Today, I gave it to him. The ceremony ended. The stage lights dimmed. Guests drifted out. Screens went dark, and the Nova Grid logo shimmered once more across the backdrop. I gathered my notes and turned toward the exit behind the stage. That's when I saw him, Max. He stood a few feet away, smaller somehow, the weight of years pressed into his posture. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, eyes tired. He looked at me with something between regret and pride, a man torn between apology and ego. "Lena," he said, voice cracking, "I'm sorry. You were right. You were worth more than $50. The words hung in the air, small against everything that had happened. I gave a faint smile, not triumphant, not cruel, just enough to show I'd heard him. "If you'd realized that sooner," I said softly, "we could have soared together." He lowered his head, silent. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out of the hall. The afternoon light spilled through the glass staircase, and the Nova Grid logo reflected across every surface. A breeze lifted my hair as Ethan ran toward me, cheeks flushed, arms wide. I caught him, held him close. We walked out hand in hand, the reflection of the company name shining above us like stars etched in glass. Applause rose again from the crowd outside, warm, unrestrained, genuine. We stepped into the sunlight. Before crossing the final doorway, I looked back at the hall one last time, the place that had marked the end of one story and the beginning of another. The fading light cast our shadows across the floor, merging with the Nova Grid emblem behind us. I whispered, "They once said I wasn't worth $50. But worth isn't measured in money. It's in the courage to stand when others try to make you kneel." And with that, I stepped forward, steady and sure, carrying a light that no one had given me, one I had found, earned, and refused to let fade.